Okay, so I want to talk about a number of different things today, and they relate to a number of different sort of aesthetic and post-aesthetic concerns, as well as organizational concerns, and I'm in the midst of one project, which is simultaneously a number of projects, and it's turned into a sorting project, which relates to one of the categories of the work that we do that has to do with sorting of objects and the sorting of subjectivities, and the way that those sortings relate to economic opportunities and hierarchical structures within social organizations, which has been part of my work for a very, very long time. And another part of the work that we're doing relates to the reconfiguration. I had begun calling it an adjustment, but it's become a major reconfiguration of our space-time travel communication coordinate system. And the reason that it's a major major reorganization is because that it's now being incorporated with the conceptual idea of the Waggle Dance, and it's going eventually to be not only a space-time travel device, but a kind of a system for navigation and dance instructions that relate to the coordination of various kinds of mappings. And I want to talk about those mappings today. That's why I have this volume, Hammond's Perpetual Atlas of the World. And I really like the idea of an atlas being perpetual, rather than fixed. And I'm sure that one of our favorite poets to read and quote from and to refer to, for various reasons that also relate to a number of different projects, William Blake, would also like this idea of the perpetual atlas of the world. And of course, this atlas is composed of two-dimensional representations of various slices, right, of our globe. If you're not a flat earther, and you believe in a spherical planet, which I guess I should, just come out right now and say I do. Oh, that's Leo in the background. I do believe in a, not certainly not perfectly spherical planet, but basically, a three-dimensional object that moves in space, according to the laws of the universe, particularly gravity around the sun, that occupies a place in these gravitational rings that we, refer to as the solar system, et cetera, et cetera. So space-time travel communication coordinate adjustments is another project that we're engaged in, as well as sorting. And we've entered sorting really because to make these adjustments, we've had to add all of these various these elements to our collection of music in order to reach the number 360, which, as you will be aware of, I seem to have misplaced one of my my necessary tools. I'll have to go. I need a compass, and I'll have to go get the compass. But before I get the compass and refer to the 360 degrees of the circle, which will be part of this project today, I'll just explain why I began with this image, oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And this is a collection from a film, and some of these songs are pretty amusing, and some of them are even pretty good, and it's one of the CDs that I had considered and probably will incorporate into the Apple playlist that represents the system of, or one of the systems, or an element of one of the systems in what we refer to as space-time travel communication coordinates. And the reason that I'm beginning with this, and as I said, there's an interesting lost highway. This idea of a lost highway, which is apparently one of the labels for this record, also relates to our work today. The idea of being lost, and the question that the name of this film, raises, oh brother, where art thou? And of course, you recall that this is the Coen brothers, and it's a kind of comical retelling of the tale of Odysseus and his return to his home and to his family following his exploits in the Trojan War and all of the adventures that he has in returning. And music has a big part in this journey and in this venture. And music is, one could say, the economic backdrop for the unfolding of this particular odyssey. And because of that, I suppose, and the theme of music and recording, right? Particularly recording, because some time is spent in recording studios, and there are some references to musical history in this as well, like, for example, references to I can't seem to find them on this record. I really can't seem to find them on this record, so maybe I'm misremembering, and remembering something else. But I had thought that there were some references to Robert Johnson and the myth or the folktale of his selling his soul to the devil in order to learn how to play guitar, and how that relates to the Faust myth, which would also play into this kind of postmodern reconstruction of myth and fairy tale, and Robert Johnson at the crossroads and what the crossroads represent. But I really can't seem to find any references in that in either the music or the liner notes. So maybe I'm mistaken, and maybe I'm misremembering some of the elements in this film as something that belongs to that Alex Alexi novel, in which Robert Johnson, in fact, does play a significant part. What's the name, Laurie, of that Alexi novel in which Robert Johnson plays a big part? Sherman Alexie. Anyway, there's that's an interesting image. Chris Thomas King. There's actually some pretty good stuff on this. On this label. I don't know if this label includes all of these artists. Anyway, whether I'm remembering it correctly or misremembering it, I do remember there's the Dapper Dan, that George Clooney as this Southern avatar or representation of or reworking of Odysseus uses to slick his hair back. Anyway, I had remembered that there were some references to Robert Johnson, and that was interesting. And but mainly, I'm focusing on this to begin with because of the idea of being lost, and this question, oh brother, where art thou? And And yesterday I added 4 more simple playlists to the configuration of space-time communication coordinates, and I was thinking about doing a series of 4 pieces, involving the addition of those, and then I realized that with all of these, pieces needing to be added and sorted, and let's begin with that. But before I begin with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the compass that I need, because at some point we're going to have to build a semi-transparent compass that we can use on these 2-dimensional images of segments of our world, that are defined in more than one way, but certainly defined, geopolitically, as you can see here, as well as geological surfaces. In fact, more in terms of geopolitics than anything else, obviously, and that's why we're using this type of map, so that we can make social political interventions in the world, and if we had no desire to do that, we could use a different kind of map, and we might even be able to utilize a different kind of dance, and not a dance that the bees do, either circle or waggle, but something else, because we might want to define space differently. But to get there, let me first go ahead and fetch the compass that I had neglected to get. All right, so here's the compass. It's not a very good one. I have a much better one that I use for occasionally, for the purposes of inscribing circles on the surface of canvases when I create mandalas. I don't believe any of these circles required compasses, but some of the more exact figures do, like this one is fairly exact in certain ways, and I certainly would probably have used this tool, but the precision tool is taped closed, and I'm since we're in the middle of this piece, I'm not particularly and the requirements of the circle that we're going to draw today, the precision of it doesn't have to be entirely exact, so this should suffice, and I don't want to spend too much time digging through art materials and supplies rather than producing this work. Now, Leo's inside, but Fiber, I believe, is still outside. So or maybe not. Yeah, there he is. So one of the contingents in what we're going to do today, will be that we'll be interrupted by his needs. See, there he's going already. His needs and desires to come in, and then another contingent is that we're making garbanzo beans, and so I'll have to check on this. Let's see if I can get some steam in the camera here. There we go. So I'll have to check on that intermittently as well, in addition to what we're juggling here. And you recall that what we're juggling is obviously these are collections, right? Not in a serious collector type of way, but in the conceptual way that one of the domains that we work in is belongs to this idea of collections, and the way that collections participate in, again, economic structures and and hierarchies and colonialisms and all that, and what acts of collecting mean, and how acts of collecting are acts of sorting. So collecting always relates to sorting, and organizing the space-time travel communication system relates both to sorting and these collections, and relates to what? Set theory, of course, because there are multiple ways that we can put these items into space-time travel communication coordinate systems. Okay, and there are multiple ways that these sets are already organized. For example, okay, so this particular, now I used to have a lot of Leonard Cohen, but most of it was either on cassette tape or on vinyl, and of course, you know, I don't have any of that any longer, and don't have any way of playing it. And a lot of these Leonard Cohen CDs belonged to my mother's collection of records, and when she passed away, then I inherited all of her music, and of course, you know, the rest of whatever she had as a collection or non-collection, and some of it I kept, and some of it I didn't. And these songs, if you're a close reader of my work, you'll relate to one of my mother's final requests, which I took as being amusingly ironic, on one of the what would you even call it? The forms that she had to fill out when she specified what, you know, her final requests were, if there was to be a gathering or some such event, what music would you like to have played? And she put something upbeat like Leonard Cohen, and I really found that amusing. So, you know, one of the, not only because I like Leonard Cohen, but one of the reasons that I kept all of these collections of hers was because I you know, so appreciated and found that comment, you know, very endearing. She had a lot of these collected works of Leonard Cohen, and that makes a really interesting problem for sorting these into. Now this one isn't. This was Songs of Love and Hate is an original, you know, album as the artist conceived it, but a lot of these other ones, I guess there are only two represented here, but I think there's another one somewhere else. I think I need to re-add this one because there are some problems with the way this one got added. But the problem in putting these in is that there are a lot of repeats on the collection, and as you can see, and so these sets, you know, that include overlapping elements within these sets that are collected from other, you know, original sets, you know, give rise to some problems. So one of the ways that I was thinking about reorganizing the space-time travel communication coordinate system as it relates to the Apple playlist that I have is that sets like Leonard Cohen that are largely composed of these best of or collected volumes of work could be placed in the smart playlist set, and I could just put them in, and then Leonard Cohen wouldn't have a place within the 360-degree circle, but would have a place in the primary initial set that precedes the 360 units. And then there's another example that works fairly well for that as well. See, there are this is another collection, so a set of various artists, sorted by the genre of flamenco guitar. And flamenco, you know, derives from a gypsy or Romany, right, style of playing guitar, and so you know, relates well, in various ways to some of the work that we've been doing recently, but specifically to a piece involving Hendrix and the Band of Gypsies, and I can't find the piece on here, but an early piece of in the sort of classical development of Spanish guitar called Lágrima, and which means the teardrop. And that's not apparently, unless I'm just missing it, not replicated on any of these, but it isn't entirely important that I locate either. The point being that this John Williams collection, this Spanish guitar anthology, this Spanish guitar anthology, and the piece that I just put in can all be relocated in the complex set of playlists that precede the 360-degree circle, and but that takes some time, and as you can see from the layout just here in what I was beginning to sort and organize today, that there's a certain amount of mess involved in the process, right, of reorganization and adjustment, and there's also a certain amount of mess in the process of map making or remap making, and I don't know if that's true of cartographers in general, but it's certainly been true of the maps that I've made. Let's go ahead and check on the garbanzo beans. There's a section in Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, and one of the characters, I can't remember which character it is, but one of the characters really likes garbanzo beans. And in The Name of the Rose, if I recall correctly, this, at least in the English translation, and I don't remember off the top of my head who did the English translation for. It's interesting. I have Calvino here because he relates to this project today, and his translator is William Weaver. It's possible that William Weaver is also the translator of Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. But what I recall in that translation is that this character's love of garbanzo beans, the garbanzo beans are referred to as chickpeas, and I remember, and I may etymologically be misconceptualizing all of this, but I remember thinking that was funny because Umberto Eco is Italian, so it sounds, at least to my ear, that garbanzo is closer to an Italian word for this particular dried legume than chickpea is. So I had always wondered why they were referred to as chickpeas and not garbanzo beans. But again, I may be etymologically misconceptualizing this. All right, so. So we're in flux in a certain sense, and certain suggestions that have been made, or that I have interpreted as having, been made relate to this idea of being lost. And these space-time coordinates that I've received that refer to being lost. Well, one of them was made in a combination, I believe, of anagrammatical and anacronymic references, in which a piece's title, one way or another, could be reorganized into the letters L-O-S-T. And I took that, message as an intentional act of communication rather than a random function of aleatory occurrences related to the observations of certain, sets of information in space-time communication coordinates. And as a message, lost, I took to mean that the system right now is undergoing too many transformations to keep track of, and so I thought I would address that question of the too many transformations to keep track of, and of the being lost, and relate it to our experience in a number of different ways. And it's a good time to do it because the internet system that we have and that we're using via this company called Frontier, and I don't really know why, but is down right now. And I can provide evidence of that by going over here. And so this is the Frontier network communicator that sends signals so that we can get online. And as you can see, these blinking representations of either what appear to be like I don't know if that's supposed to be a wavelength or whether that's supposed to be a part of a circuit, but whatever it is, and it's been this way for a day now, but 24 hours now, or slightly less perhaps. But there's no telling when this might resolve itself, if it will, or whether we're going to have to find another method of receiving internet service. And so almost as if in there, that turned red. Now it's not even attempting to find a signal. So as if in sympathetic or empathetic perhaps response to this mess of reorganization, we've lost that way of receiving and communicating on the internet. And Lori, I don't have one. I don't have a chip in my phone, but Lori has a cell phone that we can use as a hotspot, so I'll be able to get some information up on the web and look at in a limited in a limited way. I'll be able to both observe the internet and to post further communication on the internet, and hence the production of there was Leo in the background. Lori's taking care of that particular intervention, however, that particular interruption. But as I said, there's all this stuff going on in the background, and so the background, again in this instance, is sympathetic or empathetic to the mess and the being lost, but also provides this kind of epiphenomenal, and I guess we could say epiphenomenological backdrop to the way that I work, right? So For example, this sorting piece, the sorting of pronouns for Alan Capro, could exist entirely as a discrete and separate, function from the idea of collections, from the idea of space-time travel, but tends to intersect with it in multiple ways. And as I've stated many times before, one of the ways that I like to work is by creating a system and then developing some kind of dynamic means of incorporating it within another system. And sometimes those systems are mere sets, and sometimes those systems have mechanics that exceed the conception of a set, and that are dynamic either in terms of a transformation, which might be a transformational grammar, or it might be in terms of a framework of multiple durations within a set of operations, or could belong to more subjective and freer, like as in free verse, intuitive organizations of memory and deployments of memory, as in ideas of train of thought, as train of thought and flow of consciousness was such a almost ubiquitous strategy in the development of the representations of modernism in literature, and and for a number of reasons, right? That idea of a kind of unconscious driven motivation behind the flow of verbalization replaced these strict what you call like hierarchically organized strategies of syntactical organization, right? That are represented by concepts such as paragraph and to some extent theme and chapter, and that the idea of a linear temporality, one of the first disruptions of the idea of linear temporality, was presented in this idea of stream of consciousness or flow of consciousness, that thought would organize itself as an associative action, right, based on, if you're a Freudian, based on unconscious desires and motivations, that and this attempt to bring things to the surface that might not be provided in any other way, but also as a response to, for example, the external world, like this linear development that I'm providing right now is being interrupted by Fiverr, who is barking over on this side, and who I'm letting in. So that material interruption, right? Which certainly he's more than just a material interruption, but that interruption is challenging, right? The linearity of the organization of our discourse. And in philosophy, that doesn't often happen, right? Like, so Hegel isn't often interrupted by this kind of phenomenon that exceeds the linear requirements of his discourse, and in fact, his model of the development of art, doesn't include for that kind of polyvalent, meta phenomenology of world in which we participate, and as I said, that idea of consciousness as associative from inside, internally, from subconscious and unconscious motivations, as well as externally, right? You see the external stuff comes in a lot in Apollinaire as I read him, like that beautiful poem of Apollinaire, and he's in the trenches and it's raining and it's muddy and the rain's coming down, and this rain that's coming down, it reminds him of these romances that he had, when he was in a safe place, not in the trenches, fighting in World War I, but in this safe place that he longs to return to, filled with a different life and love in Paris, and he says, the rain is filled with women's voices, and it takes on this kind of calligrammatic form in which these words, right, that he's thinking about and constructing out of his unconscious desires and longing. And in that way, it relates to this idea of internal motivations, but it's inspired, right, almost in this Proustian way, by the rain and the smell of the rain and the raindrops falling on him, and perhaps reminiscent in a certain sense, although he doesn't describe it in that poem, of tears or lagrima, right? So from both directions, you see. From this internal motivation of the unconscious that gives rise to the associations that break out of linear narratology in the form of what we often refer to as stream of consciousness, but then the motivators that one already sees in Marcel Proust, arguably, one of the most important early modernists, in which the phenomenon of the world, is always, making demands of one's consciousness, and as I said, the importance of that moment, in the conceptual understanding of literature is that it breaks out of these abstract ideas that formed and articulated a philosophy of universal this universal subjectivity that belongs to philosophers like Hegel and to some extent Kant and others, that represents an ideological problematic that was, if not consciously, the inspiration for some of these aesthetic modernists to challenge and to break out of, in terms of the epistemologies that underlie and that lurk in the background of these aesthetic assumptions. It certainly was, was inherent in the way that their strategies developed, and oddly, as inherent as it is, it's often overlooked by philosophers of art and critics who seem to fall back on the same kind of universal positions and ignore material and phenomenological constraints that belong to embodied subjectivity, and so our work is both participates in the elaboration of modernism and postmodernism and its strategies and deployments, as well as attempts to meta theorize regarding the history of the deployment, and development of these strategies, and in some way that's what we're we're doing both of those things today in talking about the difficulties in making these adjustments to space-time travel communication coordinates and all of the different kinds of activities and parts, of the work that we're involved in doing it, and making speculations that belong to principles of art construction and art history and also theories of consciousness and communication as well. All right, so I think in terms of the mess that we have made of the system of space-time travel communication coordinates and the keeping track of those coordinates, I think that what I'm going to do with that is rather than continuing and with the series that I begun and noting all of these adjustments, we're just going to assume that that this message from Frontier and our lack of ability at this time to communicate using this system is a kind of message from a kind of intelligent entity, or that can be taken that way, as a communication of being lost and of requiring some time just to sort all of this out. So I'm going to utilize that as a suggestion that rather than attempting to keep track of all of these coordinates and numbers and how they exist in relationship to one another at this time, that for the time being, what we can do is simply admit that space-time travel communication coordinate systems, as we're using them, are in process right now. And once we complete once we complete the reorganization and fully incorporate the 360-degree circle as an example of the Waggle Dance, then I can just make a new inventory of whatever precedes the 360 units and the 360 units, and I can do that just by scrolling down the Apple playlist from 1 prime, through whatever completes the 1 prime, if that's 40 or 80, and then the 360 units that follow from 1 to 360, and that will be 360, but it all has to be sorted out. So if we can do that, then and we can just keep these coordinates, the organization of these coordinates in abeyance for a bit, then I can focus on some of the perhaps more interesting and not merely technical aspects of the organization. And I thought I would do that today, and that's where we're getting to with this volume, Hammond's Perpetual Atlas of the World that I referenced before. And we can begin here. This is a two-dimensional image of the continental United States, or excluding Alaska that's detached, you know, over here. To the east of Canada and above certain areas of Canada, and certainly above the remainder of the United States, and the fact, right, of the United States being discontinuous in space-time is relevant to the map that we're going to build, and the inclusion of the idea of the Waggle Dance in space-time communication coordinates and the 360 degrees. All right, so let's draw a circle. Let's draw an imaginary circle here, and I don't want to ruin the map, but I'm drawing an imaginary circle. Here's the circle, and I don't know where the center of the circle is, but it's not too important, but somewhere here. The 360 units now, if we imagine this is the center of the circle, will allow us to articulate vectors in the coordination of the degrees of the circle from the center, right? So 0 degrees would be a northern direction here, and 90 degrees would be an eastern direction. 180 degrees would be south. 270 degrees would be west, and 360 degrees again is the same as 0, and that would be north. And then all of these potential degrees, you know, between these 90-degree segments would represent, you know, vectors that account for potentially, you know, any space within the continental United States, if I utilize this as the center. All right, so let's think about the Waggle Dance in this way. Now, we talked about the idea of flat Earth as opposed to a sphere, but this map, which presumably, you know, because it has these longitudinal and latitudinal lines, and represents the form of the curve, you know, from which it's bent, the map makers realized that the Earth was not flat, that it was in fact a globe, that it was in fact a sphere, or almost a sphere, and that in making this map they had to bend and distort it into a two-dimensional space. Now, the Waggle Dance itself, and here we come to some interesting questions. The Waggle Dance itself, you know, supposes that a bee on one level recognizes her existence in space-time in the form of a two-dimensional plane. And the reason that it does that is because, at least insofar as we understand the Waggle Dance, that it represents directionality in relationship to these 360-degree plots, right? And in order to do that, it has to conceive of its relationship to space and time in terms of a 360-degree circle drawn upon, and not necessarily with that vocabulary, but conceptually, it depends upon the idea of a two-dimensional plane upon which 360 degrees can be mapped, right? And that aspect of the communication of bees either belongs to the bees' conceptualization of their universe as transform a bowl into a flat surface, or as lying in a relatively, you know, flat plane. Now, I don't know whether honeybees think that the world is flat, or whether they understand that the world is a sphere, and that they've merely made this this sort of mathematical translation in order to simplify their communication. Imagine how complicated it would be for the honeybee to dance this dance with a three-dimensional model of the coordinate system, in which we have something like that in longitude and latitude, right? But even longitude and latitude is a linear, you could say, sectionalization of a three-dimensional object, right? Because it's still a grid that that takes two dimensions into account, and that coordinates these two dimensions on a flat surface, and that organizes this flat surface by distorting and sectioning, like the way that one would section an orange, and flatten out the sections, that one had sliced from the orange. But knowing that the surface of the orange is in fact not a two-dimensional plane. All right, so I don't know whether the European honeybee or any variety of honeybee related to the bee or any other bee that might or might not perform a similar dance conceptualizes her existence on the earth as belonging to a geographics and to a physical existence that's essentially a flat Earth theory, or whether they conceive of this dance as a translation of space-time into this mathematical representation of a three-dimensional object as a two-dimensional plane. I don't know that. And I don't know if and I doubt even whether it's one way or another. I doubt that it exceeds, right, the psychological structure of instinct. That is, it's whether the bee understands that it's a mathematical operation, and understands, of course, is the wrong word, but or merely misrepresents to itself the nature of the physical universe. I doubt that is a conscious and metacognitive operation on the part of the bee, and that in fact it seems to me more likely that it belongs to almost the ontology of the bee's communication and integration with the external world, right? One could say that the biological necessity of an integration with the external world is an element that all living creatures share, but that the form that integration takes varies according to the complexity of the living being and the development of survival strategies and other requirements that take place over the course of thousands or millions of years. So, in any case, whether it's a result of the bee's misunderstanding of the world as a flat, two-dimensional plane, or whether it's an understanding of the need to transform the complexities of three dimensions into two dimensions in order to do this dance in as simple a way as possible, or whether it's a misunderstanding that we have in conceptualizing the circle dance and the waggle dance of the bees. In any case, it does depend upon this idea of a two-dimensional plane, and hence, it lends itself to the application of cartography and map making, and what I can do with this incorporation of the system, the 360-degree system that the Waggle Dance employs in relationship to space-time communications. Now that we're adding enough units in the space-time travel coordinate communication system to represent 360, is that I can build maps, and I can give dance instructions and direct dancers to various coordinates, and because I'm doing this in a two-dimensional system, I can coordinate from any point in any map that I have in any flat map system, right? So I like using this map because, well, let's see. This is the page number is not readily available. Oh, okay. Here's the page. Here's the next page is. I don't know if you can see that. The next page is 145. All right. So this page is okay. There's a little space-time synchronicity right there. The page that we're looking at is 144. All right. So if I'm on page 144. I can, from any designation, create a circle. So say I want to begin where I am. Let's see, where would we be? We would be roughly here. That's my physical space-time loci at this moment, right about there on the just slightly on the Arizona side. I literally, if I walk 100 yards, I will be in New Mexico. but technically we're located in Arizona, and this is interesting because we're on the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation, as an autonomous or semi-autonomous, self-organized, governmental system that as a reservation that is acknowledged and has certain autonomous rights, granted by treaties. Although those are eroded as the U.S. government sees fit to erode them, and as is the case with almost all U.S. In fact, you could just say all U.S. Government promises and rights granted by treaties tend to be. But in any case, it's an interesting problem in terms of the geopolitics of this map, because in fact the system that should in some ways be independent of the lines that are at least self-governingly independent of the lines drawn here, is in fact not, because for example, in public education, anytime you take a grant from the federal government, which you need to do in order to to receive funding for your schools and for example, here's one example. In order to receive money for school lunch programs, you take money from state and or federal government systems, and then you fall under the stipulations and rules and regulations that those state governments require in order for you to receive such funding. So you can either be independent or you can feed your children, and it's not really a choice, is it? Right? So there are all kinds of ways in which freedoms and autonomies are taken away, and and that makes a socially a geosocial political system, as is represented here, more complex than what you see in this map. Right now, if I had a map of that included the states and Native American reservations, it would also belie the complexities and in some ways fail to account for the complexities, because each reservation has a different set of historical treaty agreements with this geopolitical set, right? So in order to represent that on a map, you would require an account in time rather than the mere space, right? This is a two-dimensional representation of a geopolitical, geographical political model of autonomies and of social political borders, right? And if we were to accurately represent it, first we would need to draw in all of those stipulated autonomies or semi-autonomies that exist within this geopolitical terrain, and that we could do that by, let's just say that that's limited to reservations, but of course it's not, but let's say that it is. Well, we could add the reservations to this map on this two-dimensional plane, but what you couldn't add is all the variations in the history of the organization, of the relationship between those new items in this two-dimensional space and the two-dimensional items that exist here. And you would require time to do that. And you would require a way of distinguishing, for example, the Navajo Nation and its particular form of autonomy in relationship to, let's say the Ute reservation here, in which there's a different relationship to this map, right? And you could utilize color, just as color is used here, to do that, but the values assigned to color would have to be much more significant than they are here, right? Here color is just used as a way of distinguishing one state from another, and then these colors are repeated, and these colors don't belong to historical values of autonomy and self-government and the history of when these states were added to the Union and any of that. They're just there to mark off differences and to set apart one state from another. And so you'd have to have, in this new map in which you had multiple designations that overlap, right, the boundaries of these markers, you would have to have a much more sophisticated use of color, and that use of color would have to do with history of treaties and territories, and it would have to do with domains of autonomy granted by such histories. You want to go outside? And then the way that the colors would change when they overlapped would also belong to a different color theory, right? Because, for example, if you had, Ute territory here, then you have to have a color for that territory that will, change in value as it intersects with Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And you couldn't just choose green because, it becomes really complicated, because if you just chose green, then you'd lose the representation here. And the way that color would intersect with these values, would have to create like a pattern of meaning, and then how would that pattern of meaning relate to a different reservations intersection of values over here? You see how it becomes much more complicated. So I think we're good over here. I think that's the last time I have to check the chickpeas or garbanzo beans, depending on your translator. So anyway, so this is just a map that represents, and we may or may not, use this volume in individual instances of map references. But now with the Waggle Dance, anytime that I put up a piece, I can refer to, if I wanted to, a point, and I could name that point with the name of a city or a town, and I could refer to a page number, 147, and the pages, and then this is a perpetual atlas of the world, so it exceeds the boundaries of the United States, right? So see how many pages there are here. All right, so this volume has 287 pages. Now, ideally, it would have 360 pages, and then we could coordinate the degrees of the circle itself with the exact number of pages of the map, and I could refer to two sets within the space-time travel communication system, right? There are a number of ways, that can be used to coordinate the set of pages in this book and the space-time travel communication set of systems. We already have a coordinate system, and then as communication that relates to the playlist itself, right? And then we have the inscription of a kind of process and a kind of dance as geographical reference coordinating machine in the idea of the 360-degree circle. Then we have a series of all different kinds of maps, any one of which that we can refer to, and pages of even pages that exceed the maps themselves. I haven't done it, but I'll have to count how many pages of actual maps there are. This seems to end at 190. I'm not sure where they 192 was it? I'm not sure where they begin, but from 51 to it seems that from 51 to 192 is where the maps per se really fall within. And I'm thinking that in that section that precedes the 360 degrees, if there were 50 units, you remember we began with, I believe it was 32 units of complex sets, or what Apple calls smart playlists, right? So if there were 50 of those, then we would begin a map making system with 51. So the 51 could be coordinated from 1 to whatever 192 minus 51 is, as one set of numerical values that would refer to maps. And then that would be, we could designate these as, alpha, beta, gamma, or whatever sets within the space-time communication coordinate system. And wow, it's interesting. We can even use, there seems to be some old maps. So that'll be useful for other kinds of space-time travel operations. But so that's one set of numerical values that we can use if we're using this map set. And then the 360 degrees. Now I'll go back to 144. And you'll see why I needed the compass today. And oops, lost it. All right, Five, come on. Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on. All right. So here are some scrolls, and some of these. Here's a paper that you can almost see through. I can see through it better than you can. I can see when I look at it away from the camera. But some scrolls that I've used in various ways. For various kinds of pieces, some of which may or may not be familiar, depending on how much of our work attention to. But you can see there are different kinds of representations of writing, and different kinds of uses of scrolls. There's pedagogical learning tools and other forms of representation. A reference to a different kind of map, the labyrinth, and you can see that, I don't know if you can really see, but this is a labyrinth, and there's a representation of the toros, that Indo-European word toros, that means bull. This is some linear B. Anyway, scrolls and maps, and I think the first time that I ever made an artwork that represented a map, I made a self-portrait as an ancient map that was, like the way that the gerrymander is a kind of mythological creature that takes on the form of this map and then has this kind of ironically, symbolic representation of a dragon. I made a self-portrait as a map, that had this kind of allegorical figuration of all these mythological creatures constructing this territory, and it was in some way, I think it was a map, but not of the earthly sphere, but of the celestial dome, rather, and that, of course, is lost as most of my art is now lost for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is economic, and belongs to this category of limited resources, and that itself is is an aspect of sorting and being sorted by, right, society. So so we need a circle, and I thought I could use here's another one of these maps. This is what says, respect our right to vote where the streets have no names. If you understand anything about the way that state governments like Arizona and Texas define their voting laws, and you have to have a street address in some cases, and you have to have a ID, and then for some of us who live on the Navajo Nation and other reservations across the country, of course, there are no street addresses because the streets have no names, right? Just like in the U2 song, and so it makes voter registration more difficult. It makes it easier, to fall through the cracks. And when you're in remote locations like the interior, right, of the Navajo Nation, and you have to travel, perhaps 3 hours, to get to a place where you can vote. It all becomes very difficult. So all these strategies are effectively, designed to disenfranchise people, just like the strategies that exist in places like Flagstaff, Arizona, right, where if you've ever spent any time in jail in Flagstaff, Arizona, you will recall and remember that 99% of the incarcerated individuals are Native American, and the reason for that is to extract, further resources from individuals, monetary resources, because once you're arrested, you go through this big thing, and in order to get out, you have to pay money, and whether you're guilty or not, and and you can wait for a trial, but who has the money to sit in jail for a month or 2 or 3, and most people, if you can afford it, you pay the bail. If not, then you do have to wait, and you lose whatever resources you would have had from working, and you lose all that time away from your family, and then if you're convicted wrongly or rightly or whatever, then you lose certain rights, right? For example, so not only is this a means of extracting monetary resources from people, but it's a means of limiting their ability to move, right? Because you may not be able to drive, under certain kinds of convictions. You may not be able to get a job. If you can't get a job, what are you going to do? Well, you're effectively criminalized. You become, part of this, institutional criminalization system, in which, since you can't work, you end up doing whatever you can to survive. So the system criminalizes you, takes away your rights, takes away your right to vote, disenfranchises you, etc. And that's basically what it does, and that's basically how it's designed, and that's basically its social political motivation, right? All right, so that's what this piece refers to. All right, so just sticking with the map of 144. You see that we have letters on the top, and numbers on the side, and those are easy ways of representing points inside this map. So what I'm thinking is, any time that I want to refer to a vector or direction in the space-time travel communication coordinate system, insofar as Waggle Dance or other kinds of dance instructions need to be provided, and these, Waggle Dance and other types of instructions will have varying degrees and levels of social political performativity and various types of motivations related to movements of social equality, liberation, protest, etc. That I can choose a point. Here's a point called Emporia. That seems, or here's a point called Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, Kansas is interesting because it's not Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So either Emporia or Pittsburgh or Parsons. This is like vaguely, centered part of the map. Now, if I'm using the terrain of if I were going to stick to one map, right, I would find a relatively central position in the United States from which I could use all of the points of the compass, right? So that if say I began in LA, right over here. You can see that in terms of the map, this really only gives us from about 5 to, what would that be down here? 170 or 170 something, and then a lot of the communication coordinate points in our system would be neglected. So that'd be if we were always starting from the same point. And if I started here, where I am, there's a lot of territory that I would miss, and that would belong to the ocean over here that I'm not particularly interested in directing anyone toward. So if I were going to stay with one map and stay with this 144 map, I would probably choose a point like Pittsburgh, Parsons, or Emporia in Kansas, or perhaps somewhere near there, and use the full array of the potentialities of the compass that we have. But what I really like is the idea of using multiple space-time travel communication coordinate numbers in systems of communication to direct individuals towards what page number of the map that we're on. For example, if I wanted to do something in Alabama, and which is one of these particularly problematic states in terms of the way that it is gerrymandered and geopolitically and socially organized, how would you define it? The state itself is an organization of racial bias, right? And plays right into all of those Trumpy misrepresentations of social reality. And so if I was going to do something on Alabama, and it appropriately has this number 145, which slightly metaphorically, one could take as 45-1, right? So I don't know, these crazy January 6 people and that continue to produce representations of a world, right, that not only doesn't exist, but not only doesn't exist, but like the idea of a flat Earth, is organized by political, ideological, economic, and power relations that are largely discounted by scientific discourses of our contemporary world, and that largely operate as these phantasmagoria of white colonialist consciousness. In any case, I like the idea of a mobile map system that utilizes these multiple numerical references to organize communications of what page we're on, so what map we're identifying, and then if it was Alabama, and then these letters on top and these numerical values on the side can also be referred to establish the coordinate of the center, right? The center from which the circle will be drawn, and then we'll just basically assume, unless further instructions are given, that north is going to represent 0 and 360 degrees, that east will be represented by 90 degrees, that south will be represented by 180 degrees, and that west will be represented by 270 degrees, and that all of the vectors between those displacements will those four major compass displacements will be represented by the values in between, right? So I'm not sure exactly how that's all going to work out in the future, and I'm not sure exactly how the Apple playlist is going to look. But I'm sure there'll be some indeterminacy as well in the system, and always an aspect of problem solving. So for example, in this figure, how many faces do you see? Well, in a way, it depends on where I place the camera, right? Okay, so from here, one might say, well, there are three faces, right? But if you go closer, you'll see that there's a fourth face that's inscribed over, at least, and I can't tell whether it's inscribed over two or all three of the smaller faces, but this fourth face is clearly visible in this image, but much less clearly visible as an ambiguous figure, perhaps. Well, once you see it, it is visible, but again, depending on how I hold the volume, that fourth face or that one of four faces can become an ambiguous figure, depending upon the angle, the distance, the focus, and your prior knowledge of the image. And I'm sure that's what, or I'm almost sure, I'm almost sure that that's what this image is playing with in relationship to Mr. Palomar, which is of course a volume by Lo Calvino. So we've set up some of the terms under which these directions and vectors can now be organized, but again, there will be, and there should be, and there should remain a certain amount of free play, and cognitive choice and decision making belonging to the way that in the system that I respond to communications received back from interlocutors using space-time travel communication coordinates and messaging systems to communicate with us. So that's a lot of time that we've spent today, and there are a lot of issues that we haven't addressed. But I think what we've gotten to is some suggestions on how these maps, and the transformation of the geopolitical domain that exists as a three-dimensional space in space-time, right, that we call Earth, can be translated into a set of instructions given this idea of the Waggle Dance and the 360-degree vectors, and how they're performed in durations using multiple sets, right, of coordinated values, including page numbers, including grids that refer to what are effectively column row designations, right, with the row designations being these numerical values, and the column designations being essentially these letter values, and then defining, like either based on those column row designations or simply the naming of a center, for the compass, a place that, for the purposes of the dance instructions, will occupy, the point, from which this 360 degrees of the circle can be drawn. Anyway, we've done that, and we've suggested that some of the ways in which the system will be reorganized, based on difficulties, in a certain way that these multiple set lists give rise to, and but also, difficulties is probably the wrong word. Complexities is more interesting, because they also give rise to this idea of what an identity is in terms of compositional value, as opposed to material performance value or recording value, and these generic designations that fall within such systems. For example, this is a larger category of abstraction than some of these are, right? And then we've also, discussed the fact that for the time being, as our frontier system is in sympathetic and empathetic response to our space-time travel communication coordinate values are at least somewhat up in the air.